Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Welcome back to the podcast. We are trying something a little bit different today, and that is what I'm calling an anchor episode. So what that means is you are stuck with just me. And what I'm hoping to do is to talk about, in these episodes in general, starting with this one, is to talk about some of the things that I regularly mention casually in conversation with folks and often talk about in cabin consultation. So things that I think are just really relevant in terms of mindset and approach, but also strategy in running a short-term rental, specifically a cabin one. I will be honest, this episode is definitely more for short-term rental owners than it is for folks who are not interested in the short-term rental side of it. It's definitely more business model focused, more strategy focused, which if you're not renting your cabin, lucky you don't have to think about those things. So you might want to skip this episode. But if you're in the other camp of using short-term rentals as a way to purchase or build your first cabin, or you're deep in it and you have a short-term rental or more, then I think these episodes will be helpful for you. And we're going to start with the number one thing that if you've listened to this podcast before, you have heard me talk about it. And that is the unicorn, the workhorse, and the donkey. And the reason I'm going to start with that one is because I personally think this is the single most important thing that you should have clear about your rental from day one. And it's okay. If you're past day one and you don't have this clear, then let's do it now. I feel like better late than never. And I hope that this will be helpful in thinking about how you approach the business model of your short-term rental. I do want to be clear, this is not my idea. I got this from Annemie Tonken, who has a podcast called This Can't Be That Hard. It's for photographers. So I was listening to it on a drive up to the cabin once because I run a video production business. And I was like, okay, I think this will be relevant to my business. And it definitely was. But what I found interesting was that on the drive, I constantly was relating it more to my AirBNB business than I was my video production business. Honestly, it applies for any business. So even if you're a business owner and it's not a short-term rental, I think this can be really helpful. But I believe that Annemie is the one who actually created this. I'm going to link her original podcast in the show notes so that you can take a look at that. But what I'm going to do today is take the framework that she came up with and apply that specifically to short-term rentals and my cabins. So let's get started and dive in. Basically, the whole concept is that you can generalize business model for your short-term rentals into one of three categories. And knowing which category you are in or want to be in should be the thing that drives clarity and consistency with almost every decision you make for your short-term rental. And this is why I start every cabin consultation here, because knowing which of these three you are or want to be is going to help my advice. And my answers to certain questions is not going to be the same if you consider yourself a donkey or you consider yourself a unicorn. So I'm going to dive into each of these today. And luckily, I have run each of them so I can give you examples of what this looks like in practice without judging any other short-term rentals, but just sharing some of my own experiences. So I'm going to start with the donkey. And this would be considered, I really hesitate to use any judgmental terms or value-laden terms in how I rank these, because I do want to be clear that I don't think any of them are inherently better or worse than others. They are just different choices of how you want to run your AirBNB and what you're willing and able to put into it. But let's start with the donkey. So basically a donkey, and I'm going to compare these to clothing stores because that's something that a lot of us have shopped at before and can just kind of understand. So a donkey is like a lot of turnover for less money. So each stay is not very expensive, but you have people coming in and out all of the time. And if there's good volume, you're still able to make money off of that, even if it's not expensive. You are competing on price though. So you are constantly thinking about your competition and you want to be one of the most affordable stays in the area. And you can handle that high volume because you're not over delivering on every stay. What you're offering is kind of basic. People are getting what they paid for. They're not disappointed, but you're not over delivering. So I would say a clothing store version of this might be a Walmart or a Target. Target might be a little bit nicer. I think they spend more time and energy thinking about the actual like flow of the store and the feel of the store. And as a result, they charge just a little bit more than Walmart. But basically the clothing and the kind of clothing that they're selling there is the same. You're probably going back every season to buy new clothes at Target because it's not going to last you the whole season. But you're also not paying a lot for it, so you're not upset about that. You know exactly what you're getting when you go into a Target. So let's talk about a short-term rental example of this. When I first started hosting in 2013, I believe, I lived in a mill house in downtown Durham, and I had bought it. It was like 1,200 square feet, 2 bed, 2 bath. We like gutted it down to the studs, renovated it, and I had a long-term roommate for the first couple years of it. And then I discovered AirBNB, and I was like, wait a minute, I think I can make more money doing Airbnb and also be able to block off days and use that as a guest room. So like my family could come and I could just block that off and have a room for them. So I kicked out my roommate, and this was literally my first experience on Airbnb. I knew nothing other than I'd just come from an accelerator where the founders of Airbnb had gone through a couple years before us. So they talked a lot about it. I thought it was a great idea, but I honestly don't even think there were resources then that would tell me how to do this. So it was kind of the Wild West, and everyone was figuring out how to do it just based on like how they wanted to do it. Like, I think it was right around this time that I stayed in an Airbnb at the beach, and it was a bedroom in a guy's apartment, and he was literally throwing a party that night and like didn't think anything of it. Like, will this bother my Airbnb guests? It was not a hospitality experience. It was very much a dude trying to pay his rent by hosting in his room. And that's like honestly exactly how I started. It was not a desire to be involved in hospitality. It was just, how do I make money in a way that pays my mortgage and I don't have to have a permanent roommate? But I will say very quickly, I fell in love with the hospitality side, and this was the start. This was the seed that was planted. But let me paint the picture for you. So this is a single bedroom, a very small bathroom in a mill house. And there was, I didn't know anything. So I thought, like, I want this room to be usable when no one's here. So I took an old futon couch that I had, turned it into a bed, and was like, when no one's here, I can just turn it into a couch and use this room for something else. So it was a futon bed with sheets on it. It was in the house that I lived in with 2 dogs. So when I thought about cleanliness, I wasn't thinking about the overall house. I was thinking about just this room. And I'm not the world's neatest person. So I made sure that the house was like picked up when people came, but I wasn't like vacuuming the couch or like cleaning up dog hair. My dogs were out. They were greeting you. It was just part of the experience, in my opinion. I think I charged like maybe $60 a night. And I played with price a lot just to fill different days. And it was all about turnover. Now, it turns out when you're hosting someone in a room in your house, it is very personable. So you are getting to know them. And just the nature of like, I am a welcoming person. We got a lot of 5-star reviews because people just liked hanging out there with us. But it wasn't because I was offering like an incredible experience. My whole business model was just, let's make it cheaper than the hotels in town. Let's host people when they're here for weddings, for conferences, for events, and we'll make money on that. To be fair, like this wasn't all about volume because I didn't need to make a lot of money. My mortgage was like $700 a month. That was what I needed to make. But a true donkey is like, you have you can make the same amount as the other 2 categories. You're just doing it via turnover and you're at 100% occupancy. So that's kind of the overview of a donkey. And again, no judgment here if that's what you are or aiming to be. It's just a choice. And you want to make sure that because you're competing on price, it's like you're not offering any luxuries. You are just offering the bare minimum of what someone can expect. Okay, let's go up to the next one, which would be a workhorse. So let's imagine if we're shopping for like new clothes, we have the option of Target. Okay, now maybe we're going to the mall. Maybe we're looking at like a Banana Republic or J. Crew. There's something unique about each of those that makes you choose going into that store. They're thoughtfully set up and designed. They train their staff members to think about customer service. They're friendly to you. They're helpful. if you're at a Target and can't find someone to help you with clothing, like that doesn't really change your experience because you're not really expecting it. But at a Banana Republic or J. Crew, like you might need someone to greet you at the fitting room and like put your name on the door and check in and say, did those sizes fit? Can I get you anything else? There's just like a little bit more there to the experience. In terms of clothing, they have a distinct style or a distinct point of view. So when you go to a J. Crew, you're probably looking for workwear or something a little bit preppier, like you know the style that you're going for. Whereas at Target, they have like a little bit of everything. Depending what your style is, you can probably find something. Athletic wear, pajamas, dress wear, casual wear, they have a little bit of everything. And so now we're talking more about a workhorse. They're more of that like mid-range budget. In order to make money with a workhorse, you do have good turnover and you're not going all out with like all the luxurious things, but you are setting up systems. So you're making it really efficient for yourself so that you're not putting in individual work for each guest, but you have thought about the systems that make your place work for guests so that they're not disappointed and they have a good experience. So you're delivering a solid product and you're figuring out how to do it in an affordable way that maximizes your profit margins. So you would be reliable and professional. So in terms of an Airbnb example, this would be our cabin in Boone. It's a log cabin. I bought it 9 years ago. It was my first standalone Airbnb. I furnished it entirely off of like Wayfair, Overstock, things like that. All of the furniture needed to be assembled. The decor when I first started was like very typical mountain decor, exactly what you would expect if you've ever been to the Blue Ridge Mountains or Boone. We had like rugs that had bears on them and like lamps that had like sticks on the base of them. You can kind of picture it. It was not high end. It was appropriate for that location. That is kind of what people are expecting when they go to the mountains. But it wouldn't be considered like super high end. I think it was in the first year or two that one of the beds broke. And sure, someone could have been jumping on it or getting really lively at night. But also it's more likely that I just got a really good deal on a bed and it wasn't the best quality. So I have had to replace things there on a regular basis, but I have set up really solid systems. We've had a reliable cleaner who does most of the stuff for me. We have a really clear guest book that answers most of their questions. So we've set up a lot of things that make it kind of run really efficiently. And we really only have to get involved. We have automated messaging. We really only get involved when something goes wrong, which happens. And we obviously do that to the best of our ability in terms of like how we handle that. But for the most part, it kind of runs itself. And that I would put into more of the workhorse category. And we'll compare that in a minute in some ways to what a unicorn looks like. So now we're looking at the last one, which is a unicorn. And this is like a high-end boutique model. And this is where I knew going in, this is where Cozy Rock is. I had done a donkey, a workhorse, and now it was time to take everything I'd learned and really turn that into a high-end model. And I was doing it in a place that I wanted to spend more time, but I wasn't sure that there was the natural demand. So a donkey does really well in cities that have constantly like people coming in and out. Cities or maybe even suburbs, but like you're in a place where folks are coming. So you're able to drive the traffic for the high turnover. Unicorns can exist anywhere, but for me, I knew it had to be a unicorn in the place that I wanted to put it because I wasn't sure that it was going to have that kind of traffic. Now, it's turned out that there has been a fair amount of traffic, but we still drive most of our bookings via Instagram and marketing. And we're able to do that because I was really intentional about creating a unicorn, which is a high-end boutique model where the goal is it's not just about a place to stay. People aren't just coming to Freeport and booking our place because it's like the nicest place in Freeport. They're coming to Freeport for our cabin. And I actually did market research before we bought land there to see the kind of Airbnbs that currently existed. And I rated them all. At that point, there were like 12. So every Airbnb in Freeport, I put on a scale of 0 to 5. And 5 was a unicorn. Like I would travel to this location for this Airbnb. And a 4 was like, if I were coming to Freeport to visit family,
this Airbnb would blow me away. I would be delighted to find it. A 3 was like, if I'm coming here, kind of a workhorse. If I'm coming here anyway, like this isn't like reviews, but just how I ranked them on my rating system. Anything below that was just like, okay, this is a donkey and it's just kind of like an extra room in a house or whatever. And there were a couple 4s, but there were not any 5s. So that told me that this area could sustain a unicorn. Although, honestly, if it's a true unicorn, it doesn't need to be about the area at all. You should be able to drive people there for the place. But that was the research I did to kind of figure out, like, would we be able to stand out in the way that we wanted to in this area? And then as we were building, every decision we made was grounded in this. So we didn't cut corners on almost anything. Like, if it were a workhorse, we might have made some budget decisions that were like, how much does this really impact guest experience? But because we were a unicorn, or we're aiming to be a unicorn, it really helped me inform the decisions we were making, even about like faucets. Like, what does it feel like to touch this faucet? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it function? All of those things, because that's the thing with a unicorn, is when you create something to delight people, the expectation is that they're delighted, because you are going to be charging the price that allows you to do that. So in order to sustain a unicorn in the long term, you have to be at a higher price point, because you're putting time, energy, and money into every detail. So it is going to cost more to run that. So I remember in our first year when we shared our expenses for what it costs to run Cozy Rock, and we got a lot of shit. Like, people criticized our art budget and why we would spend that much on art. And so this is where I would say that is crazy. If you're a donkey, it does not make sense to spend $1,500 on like a textile piece for the bedroom. It just doesn't. You're not going to make the kind of money that then makes it worth it for you to run that as a sustainable business. If you're a workhorse, you're not going to do that. You might be picky about your art, but you might be getting like prints or canvases instead of original artwork. But I felt like it was worth spending the money on an original piece for the bedroom because we're a unicorn. So it informs everything. But if you're not, then what we spend money on can look crazy. But if you're a unicorn, I feel like you have to, because disappointing guests is even worse when their expectation is that they're going to be blown away by everything that you're doing. The other thing to note with a unicorn is that people going there are not price shopping. They're the folks that like don't necessarily have a budget. They're not looking around for the best deal. They're looking for, I am willing to pay for the best experience. Now, what I'll say is that the same person can be, for example, when I'm booking Airbnbs for work, I am usually looking for workhorses. I have booked donkeys. If it's just me, I don't care. But if I'm booking for my crew, I'm usually looking at workhorses. I don't want them to be disappointed, but I'm also not trying to like break the bank when we're not going to be there all day. We're going to be working on set. But when I'm traveling with Sean, I've gotten a little spoiled. And so I want to experience the best. So I am not price shopping in the same way when we're going on vacation, because I want to be delighted. That is part of the experience that I'm looking for. So the folks, the right fit for Cozy Rock, they're not price shopping. They're usually celebrating something special, a honeymoon, an engagement, a birthday, an anniversary. And so it's not about finding the cheapest place to stay. It's about finding the best place to stay for that experience. And so in the clothing world, let's say we went from Target to Banana Republic or J. Crew. Now we're talking about something like a Louis Vuitton. Two of our friends went to Paris recently and they were talking about their experience shopping. And there was like this gated line going into, I think it was Louis Vuitton, but I don't know brands very well. And people were standing in line, and I guess they had booked an appointment, so they got escorted in at the front of the rope line. They hand you champagne when you come in. You have a personal shopper with you the whole time, getting you everything that you need, delivering it. Like the whole thing, from literally the door outside all the way to checkout, is like an experience. And that's what a unicorn is. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a unicorn Airbnb. Okay. Now that we've overviewed them, let's talk about where some of these can go wrong and what I've seen go wrong with folks who are running each of these. So I'm going to start with unicorns because that's where we ended. And honestly, this is where I see the most people, especially in this cabin world, going wrong. And that is because when you promise a luxury experience, If you don't follow through on that, on any of it or even just some of it, but you still charge the unicorn price, this is where you leave people disappointed. And so wanting to be a unicorn and being able to deliver on being a unicorn are two different things. And it's not always about desire. You might really want to do best for your guests, but there's a couple reasons why you might end up falling short there. And so I would say like an example of this might be an expensive Airbnb that is beautiful, has a higher price tag. They've furnished it with like exactly what they think they should from Instagram or Pinterest sites. And they're like, this is what it should look like to be beautiful. But then they have like a ton of rules in their guest book or ask you to do everything but the deep cleaning when you leave. Those things might be fine in a workhorse, but if you are paying the price tag of a unicorn and then you have a guest book that is making people tiptoe around, you are taking away from that experience. And now you're ending up with guests who might feel like a little bit resentful or just a little bit disappointed that they didn't get the full high-end experience that they were hoping for. So I think if you're putting yourself in the unicorn camp, you have to really commit to following through on that experience from start to finish. Like if you went to Louis Vuitton and at the door were greeted with champagne, and then at the checkout, they put your clothes in a plastic bag, there's some dissonance there. You're like, wait a minute, this does not align with the experience that I was promised or the experience that I was expecting. And then that disappointment is very real. And so I do think if you want to be in the unicorn camp, you have to be really committed to doing all of these things. And sometimes I see this happening with like a new Airbnb who might look at others in their area or in other places and be like, oh, well, mine's as beautiful as that one. I want to charge the same amount. So I'm just going to charge what they're charging. But maybe they don't have the experience or the desire or the resources, like the startup capital to actually create that. So they're pricing it because they think by appearance it looks the same, but then they're not able to follow through on all the pieces. When I say experience, what I mean is I think what people really want in a unicorn, whether they're able to articulate this or not, is confidence. Like I was saying this to Sean the other night, we were at dinner and we had a server who I think was actually new at her job, but she just approached the table with confidence. She even said to us at one point at the beginning, she was like, if you have any questions about the menu, just let me know. I won't be able to answer them, but I will find you someone who can. And I kind of loved that. She was just owning like, I'm new here and I might not have the knowledge to answer it yet, but like I am here to make your experience better. So I will find someone who can do that for you, right? And that was confidence. And when we go to restaurants and have someone who kind of like tiptoes around or like stumbles when talking about the menu, you're not convinced. You might like them, they're nice enough, but you're not convinced that they have the experience to really take care of you. I think the same thing is true with an Airbnb. Like guests are traveling and they want to know they're in good hands. And so being confident about what to do in every situation helps to deliver on that. And the longer you've been hosting at an Airbnb, the more familiar you are with different scenarios and what to do about them. So for example, when I first started hosting, if something went wrong, I would wait for the guest to ask for money. And now this was, to be fair, this was at a workhorse. So this might be completely appropriate for a workhorse, right? Let me know how disappointed you are. And when they ask for money, I will happily give that to you. I don't do that at Cozy Rock. I proactively offer refunds if something goes wrong. So if even something small goes wrong, like I am immediately offering a refund. I will admit I don't always get it right. It's really hard to guess like what level of inconvenience, what they price it at and what you think it should be. So I've gotten this wrong before. But I do think that by proactively offering that, you are acknowledging this is not the experience we want you to have, and we're going to make it right. And if you don't do that, then they're feeling that dissonance of like, well, I paid a really high price point and what I'm getting is not aligning with that. And then she doesn't seem to recognize that. So now I feel like I'm not being taken care of, right? And so I think this is really hard when you first start to know the right thing to do in every situation. So I do think it's kind of hard to have that confidence early on. But when you've been doing it for longer, like over 10 years, I've faced a lot of different scenarios. So when something goes wrong, I've played around with those different prices, and now I know like what I feel like is fair or right to offer them. Or I've come up with different solutions. Like maybe we have gift cards, and if for some reason the cleaner is taking too long, I can offer them a gift card and pay for their dinner. But you come up with these, kind of your toolkit grows the longer you've been doing that, so you can lead with confidence to ensure that they're having a good experience. Last week at our place in Boone, this has never happened before with this cleaner who I love, just totally spaced on a flip day. And I trust her so much that we have a camera on the outside. Sometimes I'll look at it. I don't anymore because it's just like she will always be there. And the guests texted and asked about checking in early. So I pulled up the camera. The cleaner was gone. I was like, great, you can check in early. And then I scrolled back to see when she had left and noticed that she had never come that day. And I was like, wait, maybe she got dropped off. Like maybe like this is so unlike her. What's going on? So I immediately called her, and she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was a flip today. And this is like, I got this message at like 4:00. So there is nothing, no cabin can be cleaned in that amount of time. I immediately got on the phone with that guest because years of experience have taught me that messaging them is not going to be appropriate for this experience. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry this happened. This has never happened before. Let me give you 3 possible options of what we can do about it. First of all, I am refunding you your cleaning fee right now, regardless of what we do about it. I am so sorry. Second of all, I've talked to our cleaner, and she is able to come by now, and she can make all the beds for you. She can do all that. She obviously can't do a full clean. We don't want to interrupt your stay. So like, you just let me know if that's what you want. Or the third option is maybe tomorrow when you're out and about, she can come and clean up everything, take the trash out, do all the stuff that will make your stay better. I guess the fourth option was like, she can do nothing and not interfere with your stay. If you think it's clean enough, we'll refund you the money. I'm so sorry. And they actually suggested that one. To me, that's not the best solution. Like, I want it to be cleaned. I want to fix this for you. But their preference was that we not interfere with their stay. And they said the last guest left it really clean. They were happy to make the beds. They really appreciated the refund. I did not hear from them the rest of the stay, and then got a 5-star review at the end of it. And all it took was that phone call, the proactive refund, and then offering them a variety of choices of like what we could do to make it right. And I do not think, I could be wrong, but I do not think that my first year of hosting, I would have known what to do or would have handled it that way at all, and probably would have stumbled through it. And I think honestly, like that's where I do think you can get this real quick. I don't think it takes 10 years to do this, but I do think that some of that confidence just comes from the reps and experiencing those things, seeing when you've disappointed a guest and they're mad about it, seeing when you've delighted a guest. Okay, taking note, building up my toolkit, figuring out how I make these things right. But I think the moral of the story is if you're a unicorn or you're pricing like a unicorn and you're not delivering in every way like a unicorn, that's when you get that one wrong and when it actually comes back to bite you. One more thing I'll add on the unicorn is that one thing we do for our guests at Cozy Rock that we've talked about before is we have guest gift bags, and we spend maybe, honestly, I don't even track the money because to me, this is how I think about a unicorn. Like, I don't even know what our profit margins are. I just always do what I think will make stays better. So we have gift bags that have local coffee, local popcorn, fresh salt made by a local company, stickers of Cozy Rock. Like, there's just a bunch of stuff in there. If it's your second stay, there's a different gift. If it's your third stay, there's a different and better gift. I think we spend like, I've spent up to $150 before on gift bags for like third or fourth time guests because I want them to continue to be delighted. And if they get the same gift bag every time, it's not going to have the same impact the second, third, fourth time as it did the first time. And so figuring out how to continue to delight has been work. Even figuring out how to log it and know when someone's a repeat guest. Sometimes I know because we chat, and sometimes I just don't and we miss it. So that's honestly still a work in progress for us. But that gift bag is definitely something that a unicorn stay will do. We do not have gift bags at Boone. We have koozies, and that's it. And we buy them in bulk. They're not very expensive. It's honestly a marketing tool for us more than anything else. Most of our guests leave it there. I don't think it feels like a gift, but it's a workhorse, so I'm not worried about it. Like, we're not trying to create a high-end experience. We're just trying to make sure that everything meets or exceeds your expectations. But if you're a workhorse and that's your model and you're trying to like be a unicorn, but not in every way, like you're not charging unicorn prices and then you're giving them those gift bags, this is where the numbers start to not make sense. And that's why I think it's really important to know if either your area or the amount of time you have to commit to it, or your resources, the amount that you can actually charge for it. If any of those mean that you can't deliver the full unicorn experience start to finish, then I think acknowledge that you're a workhorse, and that is 100% okay. I think it just, where these all go wrong is when you're trying to be one but not delivering in every place. So then workhorses, I think another challenge of a workhorse is that there's a lot more competition in the middle. There's a lot less folks who want to create unicorns, who can create unicorns, and who consistently create them year after year, because it does take a lot more effort. And so I think that's one of the challenges of being a workhorse. Now, one of the benefits is it takes less work. It's much easier. Our cabin in Boone, it's like on autopilot. I do not put in as much work as I do our cabin in Maine. But there's a lot more competition in the middle. And because of that, as Boone has gotten more saturated and as we lost travelers from Hurricane Helene, the numbers make a lot less sense there for me right now. Now, I do think if someone went in and wanted to run a unicorn, I still think there's space for that. But I think the workhorse model is where you experience the downsides of oversaturation. And you really have to figure out, to do it well, you still have to figure out what makes your place unique. And it doesn't have to be that we have the highest end of everything. We have a sauna, we have a hot tub, we have a deck with like a net bed in it. We have everything. That doesn't have to be what it is that makes you unique, but you should figure out something that makes you unique so that you stand out. So for example, maybe you're super into like vintage video games. So you have like 3 different systems in the playroom, and you have like an old school Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. And that's something that makes it stand out. So if someone is looking at all these different, they're kind of price shopping, but they also don't want to disappoint the folks in their group, that's something that might make you stand out. And maybe you've gotten like a pinball machine or something to put down there. So maybe it's like a cool game room or whatever it is. I would recommend it be something that you genuinely love, because that's going to make it more enjoyable for you. But something that makes you stand out amidst this kind of crowded middle field. And then when we go down to the donkey, I think where donkeys can sometimes go wrong is if you're trying to not be a donkey. You have the volume coming in and out and you're competing on price, but you're like, oh, you're seeing these other like unicorns or workhorses in the area. And you're like, well, maybe we should add these nice things too. And so you start slowly like adding nicer elements to it, but you're still charging the price point of a donkey. This is where it just doesn't make sense anymore. The business model doesn't work, and it's going to become unsustainable financially. You're not going to see the profit margins you need. And if you're doing this is what's a little bit different about short-term rentals. If you're doing this so that you have a vacation home that you don't have to pay for, other people pay for it, and you don't need high profit margins, that can still work for you. This mostly becomes a problem if this is meant to be part of your income. Maybe you have someone in your house, or it's just you, and you have to make money off of it to like pay the mortgage of where you live or your rent or whatever your living costs. Then this business model is going to become unsustainable pretty quickly. That is the general overview of what these 3 business models are. And I think the one thing I just want you to take away from this is that I think knowing which one you are and being clear about that in your listing, whatever you are, it doesn't matter if you're a unicorn, a workhorse, or a donkey, just be clear about it and then be consistent with it from start of the stay all the way to the finish. Tell them what they're going to get and then give it to them consistently throughout their stay. And that's when you're going to get repeat guests, you're going to get consistent folks coming in the door, and you're going to get good reviews. So I would be curious to know if you made it to the end, if you find this format helpful. What I'm hoping to do is build a collection of kind of these anchor podcasts that I can use when we're doing cabin consultations. I can share them with folks, or just when I reference them, I can link them in the show notes so that folks know what we're talking about. And a lot of times when I get to have conversations with folks, I don't talk about a lot of this other than reference it, because I want to spend more time hearing about them. So this is not going to be the primary format, but I am going to squeeze these in every now and then. And if you have ideas of what you would like to be featured in these, let me know, and let me know what you think about this episode. I would be so grateful. As always, thanks for joining us. Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.